participants to join. I welcome you to have a quick review of the Zoom rules. I know a lot of you would be well across them by now, but if you do have any internet issues, please feel free to turn off your video, and please feel free to use the chat function at any time during the session. Before we do get started, we will be taking a group photo. So if you are able to turn your video on, that would be fantastic, and we'll take a quick group photo before we dive into the session. Hold on one moment while we take down the slide deck. Thank you, Brendan. Wonderful, everyone, big smiles. Thank you. Wonderful, we'll get started. If we could please have the slide deck. Thank you very much. Next slide deck, please. So first off, I'd really like to extend a super warm welcome to everyone for the 4th workshop of the ASEAN-Australia Digital Trade Standard Initiative for 2021. My name is Abby Dorian. Most of you wouldn't have met me by now, but I am the new Standards Australia touchpoint for this initiative, and I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you for attending today's session, and we're very excited to discuss outreach and distribution for digital trade standards with you. I also extend a really warm welcome to our expert speakers who will be providing their insights on various strategies and experiences with communicating and delivering standards for the benefit of users. Our previous workshops have discussed how to foster support for digital trade standards and build a profile of national standards bodies in this space, the role of standards in realising the benefits of digital trade, and how to work collaboratively to shape digital trade standards. This workshop, however, will explore how digital trade standards develop beyond their initial development, to discuss how their dissemination of digital trade standards really focus on the need for customers to easily access them and purchase them. So today we'll be hearing from a variety of esteemed speakers, and thank you for lending your time today, including Janeth from BPS, or the Bureau of Philippine Standards, and Peter from the British Standards Institute, to discuss their outreach strategies for national standards bodies to extend and communicate the benefit of digital trade standards. We will then welcome Belinda Cleland from ISO and Karen Batt from Standards Australia to present on the future of standards distribution, to provide insights on how standards can be disseminated for the benefits of users. I really welcome any questions throughout the presentations. We will come to them at the Q&A, but this is intended to be an interactive facilitated discussion. With that, I will defer to my colleague, Brendan Slowey, International Learning Specialist, to provide us a little bit of a recap on Workshop 3.
Pardon me. Thank you, Abby, for that warm introduction, and good morning and good afternoon to our distinguished guests. As Abby said, my name is Brendan Slowey. I'm a learning specialist and international learning specialist with Standards Australia. So one of the things that we always like to do before we get into the meat and potatoes of our presentation today is to recap on our previous workshop. Pardon me. And as part of our 3rd workshop, we continued our Hop into DTS challenge. We asked you to complete a survey and share the actions that you plan to take regarding involvement in mirror committees, as we can see with our fantastic little kangaroo. And we got a lot of excellent entries from our post-course survey, just in terms of some of the actions that you want to take. But there could only be one winner, and our winner was Sari Hafman from BSSN Indonesia. And Sari highlighted that some of the actions that she was planning to take post the workshop was to attend other virtual meetings related to standards, whether held by ISO, IEC, or other organisations, and to follow and learn about ISO developments through the ISO digital learning platform. So congratulations to you, Sari. Your Australian themed prizes will be on their way to you shortly. Now, given that our previous workshop was on effective mirror committees, it's worthwhile for us to do a quick recap on just some of the things that we spoke about during that module, because it will link to some of the content of today's session, so for distribution and outreach. So let's run just two quick quiz questions for you. So, pardon me. In our previous workshop, we heard from Yi Li Heng, Singapore's secretary for their National Mirror Committee, to ISO TC 321 Transaction Assurance in E-commerce. Now, Singapore is a P member to ISO TC 321. So what we want to know just from their presentation is, how did their mirror committee contribute to ISO standards development? So I've got a little quiz here for you. We're just going to launch that. Bear with me one moment. So we want to know from you, how do mirror committees contribute to ISO work? And you can select more than one answer. So there should be a poll there on your screen. No answers in just yet. Let's see. Abby, should we hit them with a little bit of thinking music just while we're waiting? Okay, so we're going to give
thinking
you guys,
music always helps.
I know. So we'll give you sort of 2 minutes to answer that. So we've got 7 of 33 people so far. Let's see if we can get up to 10. All right, 8. Right, we're at 11. Very good. So 33% of the vote so far. And as I said, you're allowed to vote on more than one. So let's see, we've got participate as national experts in ISO committees, which is leading the way with 80% of the vote. Suggest national standards that ISO should look to adopt, 56%. Provide comments to ISO deliverables, 65%. And finally, decide collectively on a national stance. Only 36% of people voted for that option. All right, so let's see, we're at 22, so we're at 66%. 11 more to go. If you haven't voted, we'd love to have you vote. We've got kind of 15 seconds left before we'll publish the results. All right, we're at 23. 23 out of 33. Oh, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so we'll end that poll and we'll share those results. So you should see on screen. So just in terms of how do mirror committees, or anymore. So in terms of how do mirror committees contribute to ISO work? So what we've identified here is participate as national experts in ISO committees. That scored the highest. Second, provide comments to ISO deliverables, 61%. And then we had suggest national standards that ISO should look to adopt as our third one. And then finally, decide collectively on a national stance. So let's have a look at what Singapore had in their presentation. So as part of Yi Ling Heng's slides, we can clearly see that Singapore's national mirror committees are responsible for participating as national experts in ISO committees, providing comments to ISO deliverables, and deciding collectively on a national stance. So they don't suggest national standards for ISO to adopt. All right, let's go through our second revision question here. So when we look at this, so in our previous workshop as well, we heard from Miss Emily Dawson, who's the committee manager for the ISO Technical Committee 307, which is blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. Now, Emily provided 3 tips for mirror committee managers to effectively manage their committees. And we want to know from you, what were those tips that she provided? So we want you to select 3 options from this list. So 3 options in this list of how a mirror committee manager or a secretary could effectively manage their committees. All right. So let's see, how are we going? We got no votes so far. One vote. Okay. So 2 votes so far. And again, you can vote for multiple options. 3 votes. Okay, so I like what I'm seeing here. So focus on relationship building with ISO committee manager. Okay. What else do we have here? Oh, okay, schedule regular mirror committee meetings to determine national positions for ballots and plenary meetings. Yeah, 62%. Excellent. All right. We have become familiar with ISO and IEC IT platforms for balloting, meeting registrations, documents, etc. Very good. Right, we've got 16 of 35 have voted, so we're at 44%. Looking to see if we can get up around that 70 to 80%. We want to make sure that we achieve consensus. All right, so let's see what else have we got in here. Focus on relationship building with ISO committee managers and working group conveners or secretaries. Very good. All right, so we've got maybe another 10 seconds. We've only had, we're not even at halfway of people voting. We've got only 45% of you have participated in this vote. Let's see if we can get 3 more people. Come on, 3 more votes. If you haven't voted already, if you could please vote, that'd be fantastic. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beautiful. We got over 50%. Excellent. So we'll share the results of this poll. So some really interesting ones that we have here. So in terms of those results, we have the winner or the first, so our top 3 here. So schedule regular mirror committee meetings to determine a national position for ballots and plenary meetings. That was our highest option. And then drawn on 53%, we've got focus on relationship building with ISO committee managers, working group conveners or secretaries, and becoming familiar with ISO and IEC IT platforms. So round of applause and a pat yourself on the back, everybody. Excellent job. So those were the 3 things that were highlighted, the 3 tips that were highlighted in Emily's slides. So with that, I've warmed you up. I'd like to hand you back over to Abby, and we're going to start on this morning's workshop. Back to you, Abby.
Thanks so much, Brendan. So now we will be going to our first speaker of the day. Jeanette is a technical officer at BPS, and she will also be taking us through national best practice for engagement and extending the benefits of standards for users. So welcome to the workshop, Janet.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Mabuhay.
Good morning.
Yeah. So I'm going to start?
Absolutely.
Okay. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's only 11:18 here in the Philippines. And first and foremost, I would like to thank Standards Australia for this opportunity to share the initiatives and activities that the Bureau of Philippine Standard has conducted just last October. By the way, I am Janet Puloyapoy Mabaylan of the Bureau of Philippine Standards of the Department of Trade and Industry, Philippines. Next slide, please. This is the outline of my presentation. I will first introduce to you briefly the Bureau of Philippine Standards, as well as the mandates and the programs and services. And finally, I will be sharing the activities that we had conducted last October in celebration of the National Standards Week. So the mandate of BPS is, next slide, please. Okay, the mandate of BPS is hinged on Republic Act 7394, or what we call the Consumer Act of the Philippines. So in RA 7394, it named BPS, along with other government agencies in the Philippines, to develop, enforce, and regulate standards in the Philippines. So we have the Department of Agriculture for the Can you click, please? Okay, thank you so much. We have the Department of Agriculture for standards on agricultural products. We also have the Department of Health for the standards on food, health products, and health devices. And of course, we have the Department of Trade and Industry through the Bureau of Philippine Standards for all the other products that are not covered by DA or DOH. And aside from that, we also form liaisons with other standardization development organizations, like we have the Philippine Coconut Authority and the other organizations to develop standards, and BPS will be the one to promulgate them as Philippine national standards. So basically, they have to follow the BPS directives, and the directives is also aligned with ISO and IEC directives. Next slide, please. So aside from RA 7394, BPS is also observing or taking into consideration its mandate as being a signatory to the WTO TBT agreement. So as one of the signatories, we are mandated to, as much as possible, develop national standards that are aligned with international standards. This is to reduce the barriers to trade. So to ensure that standards we develop are aligned with or harmonized with international specifications and practices, we maintain our membership to ISO, IEC, and ITU. We all know what ISO, I think, is, and IEC. And for the ITU, it is being participated through the Department of Information and Communications Technology of the Philippines. So we are collaborating, and we are conducting liaisons with it. And aside from that, we are also actively engaging with other regional and foreign standards developing bodies like STM and, of course, the next slide, please. Now, the BPS programs and services. So currently, BPS has we have the development division, who is responsible for the standards development and adoption of relevant international standards. And we also have a section for the mainstreaming and disseminating of the activities relative to Philippine national standards. Mainstreaming division is also responsible for maintaining and operating the TBT inquiry point of the Philippines. And next, for the implementation of Philippine national standards conformation, they are the ones implementing the developed standards in the BPS through the mandatory product certification. So all the products basically that that's relative to safety and quality should be certified by BPS prior to selling in the market. And lastly, we have the product testing division for the conduct of third-party testing to verify conformance with specified Philippine national standards. And now we will go to the National Standards Week. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the National Standards Week is being observed by the BPS by Philippines alongside Day. So this is, by the way, this year is, by the way, our 47th year of celebrating the annual celebration of NSW, National Standards Week. So this W is by virtue of a proclamation number 1357, series of 1974, or declaring the period from October 8 to 14 of every year as Standards Week. So we have no choice but to celebrate it alongside the World Standards Day. And the theme for the National Standards Week is always aligned with what is being declared by ISO and IEC. So whatever is declared in the international arena, we just follow it and we celebrate it in the Philippines. And in celebrating the NSW, we conduct a series of activities, and these activities are being attended or participated by technical committee members, by manufacturers, our license holders, importers, traders, and other government offices in the Philippines. So what are the activities that we have conducted this year? So there are, I think, 4 major activities that we have conducted. We have the Kapihan sa BPS. So kape or coffee in English. So it's an informal interactive session where clients are given the opportunity to ask anything under the sun with regards to standards development, BPS certification schemes, and other BPS services. And also we have the virtual tour of the BPS testing laboratory. So This year, we highlighted the newly established testing facilities for ceramic tiles and steel. And then we also have the National Standards Week TikTok contest. So considering TikTok is one of the, Filipinos are very fond of social media. This is one of the popular social media apps in the Philippines right now. And we are targeting younger generation. So we had the TikTok contest wherein all entries should discuss the difference between standard and technical regulation in a fun, engaging, and creative manner. So yun. And the last but not the least, we have the Standard Stakeholders Conference, or the SSC. SSC is formally known as Technical Committee Forum. But just last year, we decided to rename it as Standard Stakeholders Conference to widen the reach, because when we say Technical Committee Forum, it would be just for the technical committee members. So the BPS decided, why not widen the reach, widen the scope of the activity. So this year, it was attended by 800 unique users because it was virtually conducted. And we are thankful that Standards Australia was being part of the SSC 2021. Next slide, please. So before COVID, pre-COVID, we have been conducting a series of activities that requires face-to-face in physical capacity. So we had the standards essay writing contest, and we also have the standards poster making contest. So these activities are being attended or open to high school students. This is where we ensure that future professionals in the fields are already being informed of the importance of standards in our daily lives. And in the previous slide, we can see we were being joined by the ISO General Manager, Sergio Mujica, last 2018, and yeah, we were very honored to have him celebrating NSW with us. So so that's one of the pictures that we had during the poster making contest. And it's very rewarding to know to experience other students who have graduated college and then go to BPS and then asking us if they can apply for a position in BPS. And we asked them, how do you know about BPS? Yeah, we attended the NSW activities. Oh, that's very rewarding, that really the hard work that BPS is doing is bearing fruits in the younger generation. Next slide, please. Oh yeah. So one of the promotional or strategies that we have conducted is we have been maintaining a regular radio program, and we call it Consumer at Iba Pa. So in English, consumer and everything else. So we can talk everything else under the sun during this activity. And it is a DTI's consumer education radio program led by one of the famous radio anchor here in the Philippines, and of course by our DTI Undersecretary Consumer Protection Group. And this radio program has been running for 15 years already. So this has been a very quite an initiative that BPS has been doing and DTI has been doing. Yeah. And aside from that, in addition to that, next slide, please. Yeah, we also conducted before COVID the Standards Beats program. This program is to reach out to future standards professionals and to strengthen the information and promotion campaign of BPS. So what we do is we visit high school students, high school institutions, and universities here in the Philippines, where we conduct seminars, workshops on standards and the role that they are upholding to uphold the consumer's right safety. So we can see in the next slide that some of the pictures that we have during the Standards Beats program. So yeah, it's an intimate program wherein students can actually raise questions, can ask questions directly to the BPS staff. Next slide, please. So some of the other initiatives and activities that we have conducted is we always ensure that the annual communication plan and the webinar calendar is always being prepared yearly. So these documents are of course subject to changes along the way, but however, the World Standards Day celebration and NSW Week is always a part of the calendar. So we always make sure that we always do that every year, and we provide press and post event releases through social media, FB, and through email. And aside from that, this year we have maximize the advantage of virtual seminars or webinars. So we had the DTI regional and provincial offices to conduct also in their locality the celebration of WST and NSW. This is to ensure that concerns that are unique to the locality are addressed appropriately and immediately as much as possible. Yeah. So yeah, I think that would be all. So I'm very proud that BPS has been doing great, and we have been felt by the industry and the government. And so if you want to know more about BPS, you can contact us through the numbers and through the email that you can see on your screen. And may I also encourage you to visit our portal at BPS at www.bps.dti.gov.ph. And thank you, maraming salamat po for your attention and for the time that you have given us. Mabuhay!
Thank you so much, Janice. That was really wonderful. We do have a few minutes for the audience to ask any questions. I will have a look at the chat. You may place it in the chat or pop your hand up. I did have one question for you, Janice. I found that so interesting. BPS seems to be using so many different modes and media. It's definitely something that we could take a leaf out of your book. Had you found one particular media like Instagram or TikTok or something like that really effective in bringing younger generations into the loop of standards development? I know for a lot of national standards bodies, it is something that's a little bit of a challenge to get younger future professionals interested and engaged in the standard development process, particularly in the digital trade space.
Yeah. Do you have a question, Abe, or did I miss it?
Maybe you missed it. Was I on mute? Brendan, did you hear me?
I heard you. Oh, I think I'm not on mute anymore. No, I heard you. I think it was around technology. And you know, which is the preferred method to engage the younger audience?
Yeah. So far, we found the essay writing contest and the poster making contest an effective way of reaching the younger generations. That was before, and right now we have seen the acceptance or the reception of the younger generations in the TikTok contest that we had launched. And it is very rewarding to see that they are very excited to be part of the contest. And yeah, I think that would be one of the effective way of reaching the younger generations, considering that they are the major users of these social media applications. And I also like to mention our FB page, Facebook page, that we are constantly sharing. And it is I think it is a constant reminder for BPS to always share. If we have if you have friends outside BPS, we always share to them that, you know, we have a Facebook page, we have Instagram. So that really helped a lot in increasing the followers and increasing the media presence of BPS in these applications or social media.
Thank you so much. We also received one question in regards to the event in October. You had so many attendees. Was there a main sector that the attendees were from?
Mostly they are from our technical committee members and license holders, because as mentioned, I have mentioned a while ago that we have a mandatory product mandatory certification scheme, and those stakeholders are also license holders. So they know that it would be beneficial for them to participate, because that's an area for them to raise questions, to ask BPS anything. And in the SSC 2021, it's also an opportunity for them to know more about the standards and the development of standards in the Philippines. So mostly it was attended, the activities were attended by technical committee members and the stakeholders of the BPS mandatory certification scheme.
Were there any other questions from participants? Brendan.
Sorry, I just wanted to do it the proper way. So Janeth, I thank you for an incredible presentation. And one of the things that I'm working on here is Standards Australia have a next gen program, And so I was just, you might have seen me scribbling down ideas that I think that I'll be reaching out to BSN to get a little bit more context around it. So I think just more so, I think what I really wanted to know is there seems to be a lot of thought being put into how to engage that next generation of Filipinos to get involved and interested in standards. Could I ask, are there any sort of lessons that you've learned that, you know, developing national standards bodies or even people such as myself who are developing a next generation program could take on board?
I think I forgot to I missed to mention that the Standards Beats program, the one that we constantly visiting the high school and universities in the Philippines. It's actually a collaboration with the Department of Education here in the Philippines.
Brilliant.
And one of the things that we did in the past, I'm not sure if it's continually done right now because there are changes in the administration, is to create like it's a booklet for the students. And one of the things that they do to ensure that students are the booklets are being understood is to have a quiz, or should be incorporated in the class or in the lessons. So that's an active collaboration between the Department of Education and the Department of Trade and Industry. So it's not only for the purpose of having them engaged or informed of the standards development at a young age, but it's also a way of telling them that, hey, tell your parents to only buy the products that have the certification mark, the safety marks, because it's for your own safety. Because I myself, before I joined BPS, I really don't know about BPS. So it's really a great help for the students to have that program incorporated in their lessons.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And pardon me, I said BSN before, so pardon me. I just want to correct myself there. I meant BPS. Pardon me. I'm very sorry. Back to you, Ab.
That's all right.
Thank you so much. If there aren't any further questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to myself and I can connect you with Janice if you do think of anything else after the session. But thank you so much for a fantastic presentation, Janice. We've really taken a lot away and I'm sure a lot of the participants' brains are thinking about things that they can do to extend communication for the benefits of standards, particularly in the DTS space. Now I would like to go to Peter. Peter is an International Engagement Director at the British Standards Institute, and he'll be speaking about the UK's approach to engagement in the standards development space. Please go ahead, Peter.
Thank you very much, Abby, and thank you, Brendan, and thank you, Janet, for that really interesting introduction to the Bureau of Philippines Standards. There's some really quite interesting lessons I think we can learn from some of the discussion points that you put forward. But I'm really going to touch on our outreach and distribution program within the UK. I'm Peter Sissons. I'm International Engagement Director at BSI. BSI is the UK National Standards Body. We are an independent organisation, so we sit at arm's length from government. But we do have a memorandum of understanding with our national government, which is signed with our Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So we maintain the infrastructure for the development of standards within the UK. In practice, that looks like we maintain around 1,200 technical committees, made up of about 13,500 stakeholders who participate in that standards development process. So we have a very, very wide network of stakeholder interests that participate in standards development within the UK. Just looking at the UK landscape, we have about 37,000 standards that sit within our national catalogue, and we always look internationally first. So 85% of all of the standards that we publish in the UK are adoptions of international standards and regional standards from the European standards organisations. So we're the UK member of ISO and IEC. We're not the UK member of ITU. We do work very closely with the UK government in that respect. Can I have the next slide, please? So I really sort of wanted to start with just talking about some of the key issues that surround digital trade and digital trade standards. So we have a large outreach program, a large engagement program with industry and a range of different stakeholders to really understand what the key issues are. And around digital trade, they sit in 4 different areas. So the first is around trust. So how can both business to business and business to consumer transactions, how can you trust that the product or the service that you're buying is actually that service or product that is advertised. The second part is around data, so where data is held, data security, what companies are doing with data, how that data is processed. The third issue is around consumer protection, and this is very important in the UK and around the world when there is a longer link between a consumer and a manufacturer. How can we ensure that consumer safety and protection is there? How can we ensure that consumers are protected when they're purchasing products and services from online sources? And then increasingly, a lot of people are looking at sustainability. So, for example, in the food sector and food and drink sector, people want to understand the provenance of the goods that they're buying. So they want to understand actually that those goods haven't been produced or manufactured in a way that's environmentally harmful, or that are produced in ways that aren't ethical. So those are sort of the key issues that we understand our stakeholder communities are really interested in around digital trade. What we try and do is look at the sort of core messages that we need to distill and distribute around the benefit of the role that standards can play to companies and organisations, and also to government as well. And those sort of sit within 4 different baskets. The first is productivity, so increasing the efficiency of business and lowering cost of transactions. The next is around trade. So this is around the interoperability of products and services to ensure that actually when manufacturers are procuring goods from manufacturers around the world, they know that those goods will operate seamlessly with the components that they're purchasing from other suppliers. Some of the core messages sit around innovation, so the role that standards can play to stimulate growth of new sectors, and we've seen that standards play a particularly important role in areas of new technology. So where there aren't any specific regulations that governments have brought into effect, standards can actually play that role from the outset. And also around consumer protection, and a reference to the fact that consumers, when they're purchasing from online environments, don't necessarily know where the product originated. So it's really, really important to ensure that consumers are protected and the products that they buy are safe and fit for the consumption that they're designed for. We've done quite a lot of work with a company called CBR, which is an economics company in the UK, who've done a piece of work for us which looks at the economic benefits of standards to the UK economy. And the infographic on the right-hand side of the slide demonstrates some of those key outcomes. So that looks at a macro level, so what the impact is to the UK economy, and they've worked out that £8.2 billion per year is the annual contribution that standards make to the UK economy. 37.4% of UK productivity growth can be attributed to standards, and an additional £6.1 billion worth of additional UK exports can be attributed to standards. So standards are having a really, really important impact on the UK economy, and we do a lot of outreach with government contacts to ensure that they understand the role that standards play at that level. As part of the study, so the last study that we published was in 2015, we are going to republish that study hopefully this week. So there will be some updated figures. I've seen them, and they're broadly consistent with the last study that was published in 2015. But they also looked for a sector lens as well. So they looked at 7 different sectors. The study that we've just completed actually outreaches to over 1,000 different companies in a range of different sectors. And it really sort of understands how those companies are using standards. And IT is one of the sectors. And the IT industry is quite a heavy consumer of standards within the UK. So some of the sort of stats around that, SMEs are 41% more likely to export if they use standards, and larger companies are 36% more likely to export. So there's some really positive messages that we can play out to industry and government around the use of standards. Could I have the next slide, please? So this really looks to sort of unpack what our engagement activities look like and really to sort of introduce some of the solutions that we deliver. So our engagement sort of looks at a number of different areas. So the first is we have a very, very big marketing team who are there to really publicize the standards that we publish. So they look to engage with the trade press, so different sectors. They will place adverts within those trade presses to publicize the standards that we publish. So whenever there is a new standard that is being published and entering our national catalogue, they will run a marketing campaign around that. We do a lot of public relations, so a lot of engagement with the media to ensure that there is visibility of the role that standards can play within the national press. And we also have a big social media outreach. We don't, I don't think we have a TikTok channel yet. I think that's probably one step beyond our current capabilities, but the main medium that we use are Twitter. So we have a very, very active Twitter feed, and also LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn for us is a really, really good tool to engage with the business community around specific areas and around specific themes. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. We have a really, really large engagement program. So we engage with governments who can act as an intermediary to support some of the dissemination of information of the role that standards play and the benefit that standards bring. We also have a large engagement program with industry bodies as well, so trade associations and industry associations, because the role that standards play to support their members is really, really of key importance and interest. I was very interested to hear about the big standards event that BPS have. We also have a standards conference, which is an annual event. This is aimed at standards users and our technical committees. Then as part of that, we actually have an award ceremony. So we award contributions of our technical committee members, but we also this year piloted a award ceremony for standards users, because I think one of the things that we've learned is that actually getting strong use cases of companies and organizations that are actually actively using standards is a really, really strong endorsement for the role that they play. We're also starting to develop a range of communities as well. So we've done some community build around areas like the built environment and digital construction, where we use different channels to really start conversations with specific communities around challenges that they have. Now, standards may be one of the solutions that support those challenges, but they're not necessarily the only solution. So we're doing quite a large amount of outreach to communities, and we see that as the future. So we see that that will build out over the next few years. Another thing that we do is to deliver thought leadership. So we do a lot of, we publish a lot of white papers and a lot of thought pieces, really to unpack some of the big challenges that exist within certain sectors. And like I said, that's really trying to start a conversation with groups of organizations that may not have visibility of standards. You know, we've done quite a lot of research around the perception of standards within companies, and typically, for example, SMEs will view standards as a compliance tool rather than a tool that helps them to support their business objectives. So, you know, we can sort of unpick and unpack some of those myths around the role that standards can play. In terms of sort of the next generation, we have an outreach program with universities. We also run a young professionals network. The university piece is quite interesting, actually. So we've developed and delivered a range of public technical committee meetings where individuals can observe how a technical committee works, which I think has been quite a good tool to to really educate people on the role that the technical committees play, and has been a really sort of important tool to bring on board the next generation of standards makers. Now, finally, the solutions that we deliver. So we also do a lot of outreach with organisations to understand how they want to consume standards. So we have a sort of multi-level approach. So we sell single copy standards for our BSI shop, and if you visited our shop, it's not just an e-commerce platform. There is a lot of information that is useful at a sector level. So we're not just providing the standard, but we're providing some commentary around what the key issues are relating to certain sectors and certain industries, and digital trade is one of those. We've started to deliver what we call solution packs, so whereby we basically bundle a range of relevant standards into one pack. So you can see on the right hand side of my slide, we have a security solution pack, which includes 6 different standards that are really important to support data security within firms. We also have a subscription product as well, so British Standards Online, where companies and organisations can subscribe to different modules. So there is an IT module that gives access to around 4,500 standards that are relevant to the IT industry. So what does the future look like? Well, I think we are sort of learning from our stakeholders that the digital standards will be the next service that they want to procure. So how standards are actually, we provide standards at the moment in PDF and also in XML, so they are interpretable, but actually how we deliver machine readable standards that sort of are embedded within company systems and processes. So we're very much engaged with the ISO and IEC SMART program to look at how we can look at what standards look like in the future. So that's really all I wanted to say. That sort of describes our outreach programs and how we're sort of delivering standards to the marketplace. But I'm really interested in taking questions to see how else we can describe what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Peter. That was really fantastic. I do invite any questions from the group. Please pop up your hand or pop it in the chat. Jack has posted in the chat, happy to note the efforts and strategies of national standards bodies to make their standards digitally accessible to domestic stakeholders, the general public and international standards bodies. Thank you, Jack. I did have a question, Peter, while we warm up the room and wait for someone else. In terms of thought leadership, I thought that was a really interesting initiative in the digital trade space. Does BSI have a particular way of highlighting particular issues, or is that industry driven? And in terms of thought leadership, has that just been helpful to get more people aware of the standards that are available, or is that been a way to make sure people are contributing to the standards development process?
Yeah, thanks, Abby. So it's twofold, really. So the way that we sort of position our thought leadership is really to engage with industry and government around, what are the big challenges that people are facing, but actually what are the future challenges as well, where, so let me give you an example around connected and autonomous vehicles. We've done a huge amount of work with car manufacturers, technology companies and government to really understand what key challenges they have in terms of actually bringing forward connected and autonomous vehicles. So the thought leadership that we do is really, it's not designed to say, well, actually, there are a range of standards that are available that support your needs, because actually some of those standards may not exist. The thought leadership is really about developing that conversation. And I think it's about developing conversations between different groups that don't necessarily align with one another, and different groups that may not actually have a huge visibility of the role that standards play. So all of the thought leadership that we deliver is based on our stakeholder requirements, but we do have a really deeply embedded engagement program with government and industry on a sector level to really understand what those issues are.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. We have a question from Abdul. Are standards being taught at universities to ensure that graduates are aware of standards upon graduation, as far as you're aware, Peter?
Yeah, my answer would be not enough. I think that typically what we found, because we've done quite a lot of outreach with universities, we found that sort of in engineering disciplines, actually standards are a core component of a lot of university courses. You know, certainly around sort of technical engineering in the built environment, for example, standards are you know, a really core tool for that industry. I think the challenge that we've always had is sort of elevating the discussion around standards from a technical solution to actually a business solution. And I think that, you know, sort of one of the challenges we've had is sort of elevating the conversation around standards from the technical discussion to actually a board level discussion within corporates. And so actually some of the work that we've done with universities is to outreach to MBA programs, where these will be the future leaders of industry. They may not have any visibility of standards at all. So we can really sort of start that education process. But, you know, it's a great question. I see sort of around the world, a lot of countries are embedding standards far earlier than we are. And, you know, I think, for example, in Korea, they're embedding standards in sort of junior school, which, you know, is probably a step too far for us. But, you know, I think that there is a really, really interesting discussion and conversation to be had with universities around the role that standards can play to embed them in the curriculum, to ensure that people are fully aware of the powerful outcomes that standards can bring.
Thank you very much. Were there any other questions from participants at all? Please feel free to pop up your hand or type them in the chat.
I think just while we're waiting, just you know, really from our perspective, actually, we've had to put a huge amount of effort into marketing, and you know, I think that once the standard is published, that's really the starting point. You know, we've actually had to put a huge amount of effort into our marketing team. We've got quite a heavy marketing team, and they're very, very focused on trying to ensure that the business community and all of our stakeholders understand when new standards have been published. But it's taken us a lot of time to get to this point, and it's taken us quite a lot of investment as well. But that investment has paid off in terms of the standards consumption in the UK. But it is quite a large task.
Absolutely. As long as there aren't any other questions, please feel free to reach out to myself as well if anything remunerates later after the session. But thank you so much for your time, Peter. That's definitely given us a lot to think about. And I do really appreciate your insights on what happens after a standard is published. It definitely extends the horizon for what national standards bodies can do for standards and their benefits for users. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think Peter's presentation, it ties really nicely into this next little question that we'd like to ask you before we start with the second half of our presentation. So in ISO Strategy 2030 document, they identified that demonstrating the benefits of standards was the most effective way to encourage the widespread use of standards. So what we want to know is we just want to give you 5 minutes to just have a little bit of a think about that statement and then answer the following questions. So how could your national standards body demonstrate the benefits of aligning to digital trade standards? So we'll give you a little bit of thinking music and we'll just see what you come up with.
Bite your lip and take the trip.
All right, so we have our first answer in. So thank you, Karen. And Karen's going to be one of our guest speakers very shortly. So holding stakeholder events to profile current issues and how standards can assist with those issues. Fantastic. Belinda, fantastic as well. Our very next speaker, research to provide empirical evidence of benefits. And we'll touch on what ISO identified in this document very, very shortly as well. Shani, to have a digital learning platform. Fantastic. And we got a couple more. To establish new benefits. So thank you so much, Raymond Medina, Xiu Wei Yung, to connect with use cases. Yeah, so that was one of the things that Peter mentioned in his presentation. I thought it was really, really interesting knowing that this slide was coming up, you know, the importance of those use cases in selling the benefits. What else? Case studies resonate really well. Thanks, Peter. And certainly if you'd be happy to share any digital trade standards case studies, we'd love to have those. We'd love to include those in our post-course email. Anything else? Abdul. So Abdul Fatah Yatim, so include compliance to relevant standards in tender specifications. Fantastic. You got any more? David Lee, so Singapore being the center of major digital platforms, you're able to host digital trade standards symposiums for regional learning. Fantastic. Xiu Yung, again, so to demonstrate how standards improve business processes instead of just compliance processes. Yeah, so again, I'm seeing a lot of linkages to Peter's presentation. Excellent. Maybe we'll get one more and then I'll go through the three things that ISO identified. Jack, fantastic. Another example of partnering with the Department of Education to reach out to the young is a good way. Yeah, fantastic. I found that was really, really interesting in Janeth's presentation, or in the questions that we asked after that presentation, the partnering with the Department of Education, you know, to really sell the benefits of those standards and also, you know, of products aligning to those standards. So with that, you know, if you have any more suggestions, please do pop those in the chat and we'll include all of those in our debrief email. But let's just quickly go into just what ISO identified or how they envisage that they can demonstrate the benefit of aligning with standards. So the first thing is partnering with ISO members, academia, and other organizations to promote research on standardization and develop and share knowledge on the impact of international standards. Secondly, collecting data, conducting research, and building case studies that demonstrate the impact of international standards. And finally, using the ISO network to actively promote international standards and their benefits with messages supported by research and data, targeting particular industry leaders and policymakers. So I think, you know, it's really interesting to see some of the benefits or some of the ways that that you identified, you know, showing those benefits to your stakeholders. They align perfectly with the strategy that's set out in that ISO 2030 document. With that, I'll hand back over to Abby, who's going to introduce our next guest speaker.
Thank you so much, Brendan. So I think starting with the ISO Strategy 2030 is a wonderful segue to our next speaker, Belinda Cleland, Head of Research and Innovation at ISO. Welcome, Belinda, and we're very much looking forward to your presentation on the future of standards distribution.
Thank you very much, Abby. Thank you, Brendan. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Belinda Cleland. I'm the Head of Research and Innovation at the ISO Central Secretariat in Geneva, and I'm going to talk to you about the future of standards distribution. Next slide, please. So I'll start with a little bit of context around what I'm doing at ISO in the Research and Innovation Unit, and this around our strategy, what our priorities are, and how the future of standards distribution fits in there. Then I'll talk a little bit about why it's important to demonstrate and communicate the benefits of standards, how ISO is focusing on the necessity of understanding customer needs, and then what ISO is doing at the moment, the various projects we have underway to think about the future of standards distribution. Next, please. So first, a little bit of context, and we've already just been introduced to this. Thanks again, Brendan. The ISO Strategy 2030 was launched earlier this year. It's a 10-year strategy designed to outline what we need to do to achieve our vision of making lives easier, safer, and better around the world with standards. So we have 3 goals at the core of the strategy: ISO standards used everywhere, meeting global needs, and all voices heard. And as you can see there, ISO standards used everywhere has 2 priorities. The first one, demonstrate the benefits of standards, which Brendan just took us through. And the second one is about innovating to meet users' needs. So if we want to make sure our standards are widely used, we have to ensure that they meet the user's needs. And this means not only making sure the standards themselves are fit for purpose and they meet a real market need, but it almost certainly means that we're going to need to innovate, and not just in the way we distribute the standards, but probably also in the format that the standards are distributed in. Next, please. So the Research and Innovation Unit was set up in ISO in 2019. And although we're not directly concerned with distributing standards, our work on research and innovation is relevant in this case, because your aim, our collective aim, is to make sure that digital trade standards are used as widely as possible and that their benefits are maximised. So we want to conduct research to get data on the benefits of these standards, and then to be able to effectively communicate these benefits to stakeholders to convince them to use the standards. So that ties in with the research pillar of the unit, which is about gathering evidence and demonstrating the benefits of standards by promoting research and by partnering with members and academic institutions to gather more evidence. We also want to make sure that the way we distribute standards and the format that we distribute them in matches the needs of our customers. So strategic foresight can be a useful tool to explore future needs, and we are using strategic foresight in the innovation part of the work of the R&I unit to identify future opportunities. And I'll talk a little bit about foresight techniques and maybe how that can be useful to think about what could the needs of customers be in future, and what will they want to see in terms of standards formats and how they're going to purchase and use those standards. And just as an aside, we also take care of education about standardization in the R&I unit in ISO-CS, where we're looking to promote education about standards and engage the next generation. Next, please. So the importance of demonstrating and communicating the benefits of standards. Next. So this ties in a lot with what we heard from Peter actually, and the work that BSI is doing to demonstrate benefits and doing these studies on economic benefits. So why is it important to demonstrate benefits? Because we've heard that using case studies and data and numbers are a really good way to convince people and to have them understand how standards can really substantially contribute to making their lives or their businesses better. And what do we know about the benefits that digital trade standards can bring? And to those who use them, to those who participate in their development, how can we communicate what we know? Well, we should use data to substantiate claims where we can, communicate data and research findings clearly and simply. We want to analyze and use data appropriately, and always think about who you're talking to and where you're getting your information from. So we really want to promote research to gather this data, because one of the things we've become very aware about in the ISO Research and Innovation Unit is that there isn't enough data and empirical evidence out there. There hasn't been so many studies done on what are the benefits, measuring and evaluating the impacts of international standards. So we want to gather more data. And this is an example of a paper that we've produced in the unit about international standards and trade, providing a short summary of what the existing research says about the benefits to trade from standards. You might be interested to read that. You can find it on our website. Next, please. So Peter mentioned the studies that BSI has done using macroeconomic approaches to measure the benefit of standards to the UK economy. So a number of ISO members have done these kinds of studies, including BSI and DEAN in Germany, the Nordic countries, Canada, Australia has done one. And these have been very useful and very popular amongst our members to communicate the benefits of standards to users. And what these studies do is they try to quantify the impacts of standards on the national economy, looking at things like the trade balance, economic growth, and productivity. So next, please. We have done a short summary of the findings of all of these different studies. Again, you can find this paper on ISO's website. So this will show you what all of the different members who have done these studies have found. They've all found that there is a positive contribution of standards to their national economies. Next, please. And because these studies have been so popular, many members have asked us to help them in doing these studies in their own countries. And we're about to publish, maybe next week, maybe at the beginning of next year, it's currently with our graphic design department, this guidance for ISO members on exactly how they can conduct this kind of study, explaining the econometric methods that are used, what kind of data you'll need to get for your country, and helping members understand what the study will do, what the results will mean, and why that's important. So please look out for that. Next, please. We also have launched this ISO Research Library, which is a searchable online database of research publications that looks at the benefits of standards. So if you want to look for information that's out there on benefits of standards, please go to this online library. You can put in your country, or you can put in search terms like trade or digital standards and see what kind of research comes up. Next, please. So I'll move on to talk about the necessity of understanding or even foreseeing customer needs. Next slide, please. So ISO recognizes that the future of standards distribution depends a lot on what customers want and need. And as part of our implementation plan for the Strategy 2030, we have this new program on customer matters, which is aiming to improve how we learn about customer needs, how we analyze them, and how we respond to them. So this new program is going to look at these key questions. Who is the customer? Who is buying the standards? What are their needs? What channels do we have to communicate with them? And how can we integrate their feedback and the changes to meet the customer needs? Next, please. Please, yeah, click a few times and bring up all the points. Sorry, I didn't realize this slide had animations in it. Thank you. So this Customer Matters program is brand new. You will probably be hearing about it shortly from ISOCS, and we will be inviting you all to participate, because the members' engagement of this in this program will be really key to its success. So when establishing in collaboration with members, new channels of communication with the customer, and looking at new ways for processing, collecting, analysing, and integrating customer needs. That's what this program is all about. ISOCS doesn't directly reach out to customers. That's something that members are responsible for. And we saw that BSI spends a lot of time doing marketing and puts a lot of energy into understanding what their customers need and reaching out to them and reaching out to communities and seeing what their challenges are. So this is a big project within ISOCS where we're trying to become better at this and to help our members to share their best practices on learning what the customer really wants. Next, please. And we also are using foresight in ISO to look at future opportunities for standards and future topics for standards. But foresight can be used more broadly than that. In a nutshell, foresight is a set of tools and methodologies and activities that are designed to imagine and explore potential futures. So it's looking at uncertainty and how can we not predict what is coming, but how can we think about what could be coming and the different possibilities. So we can look at what's changing in the environment, how the future could develop, and then what are our options for reacting to these changes. And we can use these kinds of tools and methodologies to imagine the future of standards distribution and to imagine the ways that users in the future might want to see standards. Next, please. So we use a number of tools in ISO, including environmental scanning and scenario planning. I won't go into detail on this, but if anyone is interested in learning more about foresight and how it could be used, I invite you to contact me after this workshop. If you attended the ISO week in September, the ISO General Assembly, we had a workshop on foresight where we used scenarios, which are different stories about the future, to imagine what standardization would look like in that future. And part of that included what standards would look like. Would they be digital? Would they be machine readable? How would people be wanting to buy those standards, and in what context? So that's a potentially useful tool to imagine different customer needs in future. Next, please. So now a quick look at what ISO is doing right now. Next slide. In terms of distributing content to ISO members, we have this relatively recent harmonized API portal. So APIs are application programming interface, and this isn't, I'm not at all an IT person, so I don't understand the technicalities of how this works at all. I can just tell you that if you are using the harmonized API portal, this gives the ISO members real-time access to ISO's metadata and helps ISO members to store all ISO publications on their system and to mirror content. So whenever ISO publishes something new, whether it's a new draft or a new version of a standard, ISO members can get real-time access to all of these documents immediately to make sure that your entire catalog is up to date. And this can be fed directly into your web store if you have a web store, to make sure that all of your publications that you're distributing to your users are the most recent offerings from ISO. Next, please. Another interesting and potentially useful development to know about is that we have some new rights under PROCOSA, which is ISO's policy for distributing publications and for sales and copyright. So again, this is a really complicated sales policy that I'm not an expert in, but I do know that they recently added this new annex, which is very exciting because it allows members to work with software providers to create more value from ISO content. So previous versions of our sales and copyright policy only talked about how members could sell PDFs and paper copies of standards. And members were coming to us and saying, but we want to create new formats for standards. We want to create formats that are more user-friendly or have added value, and we don't know how to do that under the copyright and sales policy. So with this new change, which comes into effect on the 1st of January, you will be able to work with software providers to create more value using ISO standards content. Next, please. And I'm sure you've heard about SMART, standards that are machine applicable, readable, and transferable. This is a big project that's underway in ISO. Could you click a few times to thank you, to bring up the text on the slide as well. And basically, this just means that we want to develop digital standards, standards that can be read by machines. And there are various levels of this. We have defined 4 different levels of standards. Currently, we offer a level 0 paper, level 1 PDF, level 2 XML, and we're working on level 3, which is when a machine can understand the meaning of the content in a standard. And level 4 is where a machine can find and use elements in the content of a standard. So we're currently working with a lot of members to test and pilot different ideas and different technologies that can help bring about this transformation of ISO's content from selling PDFs and giving XML to the members to providing these standards that can directly be read by machines and directly be understood by machines. Next, please. And finally, just a few examples from other members about how they're thinking about the future of standards distribution. So we have one example from France, AFNOR, and they're working on linking interactive services to standards. And they want to make standards easier to understand, transform them into working tools to save users time. And they're creating these augmented standards where they would have, alongside the text, videos, images, quizzes, case studies to help people better understand what's in the standard, how they can use it. Then we have an example from Standards Norway, who offer enhanced access subscriptions for easier integration of standards content into a company's workflow. So this basically means that instead of just selling a PDF, they will actually give XML standards to users so they can integrate them into their workflow better. And we have an example from a member of our member in Canada, CSA, and they are developing a digital standards reader that allows users to create personalized standards playlists like you would with music on iTunes, using different elements from different standards. So this allows people to pull specific clauses or figures or tables or definitions from multiple standards and put them into one document that they want to use. So it really allows the user to personalize the standard for how they want to use it themselves. Next slide, please. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your attention. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Belinda. That was so interesting. I definitely learned a lot, and it's really helpful to see what's happening on the ISO side in terms of facilitating members to really emphasize that distribution piece. We will be having a facilitated question time after the next speaker, and just in the interest of time, we'll hold that for the next 5 minutes. With that, I would love to introduce Karen Batt, the Head of International Engagement at Standards Australia, who will be discussing from an Australian perspective what you can do in the future of standards distribution. I'll hand over to Karen.
Thanks so much, Abby. And I think it's a good segue from Belinda's presentation. There is some overlap with mine. So it's nice to see you all and so many familiar faces on the call today. I am going to go quite quickly, so I may flick through some of these slides quite fast, but also happy to take questions at the end and also to spend time with people afterwards if necessary. A couple of years ago, Standards Australia was in a very different position to where it is at today because we didn't distribute to customers. So it's quite funny that I'm going to be talking to you about what we're doing in terms of distribution. Excuse me, because this is brand new to us. But one of the benefits of this being brand new to us was that we were able to start from a clean sheet of paper. So we were really able to ask the questions about how the best way of distributing and what the future held. And it really was centrally around digital transformation. We knew that we needed to use digital technologies to respond to what our users need. So with that, I want to focus on 3 things. First of all, I want to talk about our focus on the customer. Secondly, I want to talk about sort of our flagship standard, the wiring rules, and how we're transforming it. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about what we're dabbling with in terms of online platforms. And I'm sure there's lots for us to learn there. So in terms of voice of the customer, I mentioned 2 years ago, we reset our distribution agreements about how we distribute standards. And so at that point in time, we were able to say, right, how do we want to distribute standards? And it was all about the customer. So we put the customer at the center of everything we do. And we say, what does our customer need? To do with distribution, but also to do with how we develop standards and how we respond to the market needs. So when we put the customer in the center, how did we find out what the customer wanted? Well, one of the tools we've put into place is this tool called the Voice of Customer, where we go out on a periodic basis and survey our customers as to what they're thinking and feeling about our business, and finding out, what their their pain points, their irritants are, but also what pleases them, what delights them. And in that way, we can get a good sense of where we need to be focusing. We are using this externally, but we're also using it internally with our internal customers too, to do employee satisfaction surveys and so on. Next slide, Brendan. How does this work? This probably looks very familiar to the standardizers on the call. It's very familiar from an ISO 9000 plan, do, check, act approach. But how do we collect the data? Well, we collect the data through sort of a surveying tool. We analyze that data, work out what we're doing best and what we're doing the worst at, and then we act. We work out what the best focus areas and the biggest impact we can have in making changes. And then we monitor that on a regular basis. Next slide, please, Brendan. The measurement of the voice of the customer, we look at various scores that comes out of that. There's a net promoter score that gives us a sense of how we're doing in the long term. There's a customer satisfaction score that gives us an idea of how we're going in the short term. And then finally, a customer effort score that gives us an idea about customer loyalty. And these scores are all important to look at over a period of time, but actually where the richness is in the sort of the words that people write to us. So in those comments that people make about their experience about a particular product, we spend a long time looking at that data that we're collecting about how they're feeling about about a particular process or a product, and then we analyze that as well. Next slide, please, Abby. So I mentioned that the wiring rules is probably our flagship standard at Standards Australia. I'm sure your countries also have a form of the wiring rules. For us, it's ASNZS 3000, and it sets out technical requirements that help our electricians, or sparkies, as we like to call them in Australia, how they design, construct and verify electrical installations. So it's a very important safety standard, very important for electricians who are wiring up our houses, but also our customers. And because it's so important, this was sort of where we first went to when we were resetting how we approach things, to ask our customers how they were interacting with the document, what they'd like to see in the future. We asked them all sorts of questions through online surveying, but also through one-on-one interviews. Next slide, please, Brendan. And we got some really valuable information out of that surveying. So we found out that the Sparkies didn't like the language that was used in it. It was too legal. They wanted us to use more everyday language. So that plain language in standards was really what they wanted. And there was too many cross-references. They didn't want this cross-referencing everywhere. They wanted more visual aids to help them read the standard. They also wanted better search tools. It's over 600 pages, this particular document. So they really wanted to be able to search a specific maybe process that they were undertaking and be able to bring up the content that was relevant to them. They also wanted different access options to access the standard differently, whether they were at their desk, whether they were on site. They wanted to be able to access that information. But also in terms of access, they wanted better communication. They wanted updates on social media. That's what they were asking us for. Give us some updates on social media if there's a particular issue that you want to highlight, and also to respond to any issues that were coming up. And they also wanted to look at the cost of the document. I'm sure you've all had that complaint about standards access and cost, and I'll talk a bit about that coming up in my next approach there. So we had this opportunity to transform the wiring rules. We wanted to make, and we're actually going through this process right now. So I should come back in 18 months' time and let you know how it went. We're in part of this process, but the main thing will be focusing back on the feedback that we got and making sure as part of the process, we're responding to the feedback that we got originally through that real focus on the customer and the user. I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to move to the final couple of slides, and that's just to highlight that we're rethinking about how we're delivering the standard. So previously we're putting things forward in those two different formats that Belinda was talking about, hard copy and PDF, but we want to move more to partner with existing and new organisations to better deliver the content to our customer. And one, if you flick to the final slide, Brendan, the one particular partnership that I wanted to highlight, and I can send out some information following this, is a partnership that we had with an organisation called FireMate. And this is one of our first partnerships that we went through, and they're an organisation that go and conduct maintenance in buildings to check that they're up to the mark in terms of fire safety. And they used to go through the building with logbooks and check that everything had been done appropriately. But what we did was they moved all of those logbooks onto a digital application so that they could record in real time how the maintenance was going at a particular site, and they were able to look up old records. They were able to access the standard through their checklist that had been built into the FireMate application. And that's been a huge success. We've had great feedback about that new application, and we want to do more of these things. We want to understand what the customer needs and then partner with organisations that have an interest in a particular area, like the FireMate organisation, and deliver usable standards content for Australians. I'll stop there because I know we're short of time, although I'd love to talk more about other ways of delivering content. Thanks, Abby and Brendan.
Thank you so much, Karen, and I know you were speedy there and I greatly appreciate it. I would love to give a few minutes to participants, however, to ask any questions. I know Belinda and Karen had a lot of segues and overlaps of information. I think this is a really great option for any participants to ask any questions to any of the speakers before we round out the session. We do have a comment here that standards should be quantified and segregated the impact to the local economy and national competitiveness and global level. Thank you for that comment. You're absolutely correct. Did any participants have any questions for any of the speakers at all? Been absolute information overload today. I can sense it from the crowd, but you're more than welcome to reach out to myself, and I'm happy to connect you with one of the presenters today. They are a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure you'll have many questions over the coming weeks as you absorb all of that information. We do have a question. Belinda, how important will it be to also measure social impact for standards?
Difficult question. Well, in a way, the way the answer is simple, incredibly important, because one of the goals of the ISO Strategy 2030 is to have standards used everywhere by everyone. So we really want to convince the wider society of the benefits of standards, and there are huge societal benefits to be measured, but not a lot of research that has so far been done on looking at the impact of standards on society. It's a very difficult thing to measure and to study. So we're actually looking into that in the Research and Innovation Unit for 2022. What kind of studies can we do to measure societal impacts of standards, and what kind of societal impacts should we look at? And we're thinking about, for example, impacts on gender equality, because we have the Gender Action Plan, but there are so many other alternatives. So lots of work to be done there.
That is a big question. Thank you, Belinda. Any other questions? Wonderful. Brendan, if we could please have the next slide. So thank you so much for everyone for attending today, and I am very conscious of time, so I'll move through this as quickly as I can. But in the spirit of today's workshop and for our digital trades program this year, we are running a third Hop into DTS challenge, this time themed around distribution and outreach. So if we could pop to the next slide, please, Brendan. If you could please complete our post-workshop survey and let us know about any of the actions you plan to take in relation to improving outreach and distribution related to digital trade standards. We'll pull all the entries together and draw a winner who will win an Australian themed prize. I will send through the survey link in the chat as well if you're unable to use that QR code. Wonderful. So just in terms of next year, we are working really closely with ASEAN and the Australian government to develop a work program for 2022. So we will be in touch for training options for Q1 of 2022 to deliver further insights on standardisation for digital trade standards, including emerging trends like digital trust, digital transactions, and digital trade raised by our presenters today. I'd like to thank everyone again, particularly our presenters, for lending their time and expertise. And I will send through a post-course survey. So we really do appreciate your insights. They help us to enrich the program and really respond to your needs. With that, thank you so much. Brendan, if you'd like to say a few words, and thank you everyone for your time today.
I just want to thank everyone for being an active participant in today's session. And some really, really great comments and some incredible speakers. So thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.